Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. I'm your host, Nick Belsky, joined as always by Nick Horwat, and we continue to preview the 2024-25 NHL season. This is part of prediction week, or I guess we should say prediction weeks, because we had our bold predictions last Thursday. If you missed that episode, go back and check it out. We had a lot of spicy takes for the Pittsburgh Penguins in the upcoming season. Today's episode will be the season predictions, penalty minutes, goals, breakout player, best newcomer, and many, many more predictions coming your way. But also, we'll be joined by Zachary Smith of Around the 412 to help preview the Penguins season, talk a little bit about what we've seen so far in the preseason and just everything in between. It's a fun interview. We think you guys will like it, and we hope you guys like our predictions as well. Let's get started. And let's start things off with the first batch of predictions, because that's how this episode's going to go. We're going to go first batch of predictions, shoot it over to our interview with Zach, and then we're going to finish it off with our last batch of predictions. So let's start it off with kind of the counting stats side of things. And of course, we're going to lead it off here with penalty minutes, Horwat. This one has been pretty easy to predict over the last couple of seasons. Last 2 years, Evgeni Malkin has been far and away the team leader in penalty minutes. Do you think he does it again?
I don't know if he does it again. I tried to actually think and see if I could come up with a different answer. The first thought I had immediately was Michael Bunting, because he had that trend in Toronto. He had that stigma around him in Toronto. But since he's left Toronto, he's been a near penalty-free man. He in 21 games, or however many he was with the Penguins since the trade, he had one penalty. He had 2 penalty minutes in his time in Pittsburgh so far. So I'm going to keep it away from him. And just because I want to try and switch things up and not go with Evgeni Malkin this time around, I'm going to go with Kris Letang. First of all, he was second in that running last year. And also, we just know Kris Letang has tendencies to just take dumb, stupid penalties. Not all the time, but pretty often, and often enough to get him this title for this year, I think. The impressive thing, if you look at the Penguins penalty numbers, is that they're relatively low. I'm pretty sure they're one of the least penalized teams usually. Consider the fact that John Ludwig, I know he's a fighter and has a bit more 5-minute majors in there, played 33 games and was third on the team last year in penalty minutes. So it is kind of tough to predict a penalty minutes leader when no one's getting them. So I'm going to go with Letang just because, he's a bonehead sometimes.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with tried and true Evgeni Malkin in this one. I mean, I understand Letang. He led the Penguins in penalty minutes 3 seasons ago, so he's the only one to have upstaged Evgeni Malkin in that territory in this decade, I guess we could say. But if Malkin stays healthy and plays the whole season, there's no way Malkin isn't going to lead this team in penalty minutes. That's just, to me, that's just a fact of life. So I'm going to go Malkin. I like that you're going Letang, though, because I think we're going to be different on a lot of these, and that was one I thought we'd be the same on. Let's move over to goals. Who is going to lead the Penguins in goals? For me, last year he had 28 goals in only 62 games. This year, I'm predicting a healthier season, a higher dosage of power play 1 minutes, and I'm predicting him to lead the Penguins in goals for the very first time in his NHL career. Going with good old Brian Rust for this one. What do you think about that?
That's a fascinating choice. I stuck with a more along the lines answer, because the way you look at Penguins history, I mean, who's led the team in goals and points since Sidney Crosby and Evgeni Malkin got here? Those two, then Jake Guentzel got in there. I think Kris Kunitz got in the conversation once.
He did. I think it was the 2012-13 shortened season. Kunitz was up there in goals.
Yeah, so aside from those 2 names, no one else has stepped in. Then, Jake Guentzel was stepping in, and now we see how that's gone, and Kris Kunitz snuck his way in once. So this time around, I like the idea of Brian Rust. Do you have a number to that? Did you say a number?
I didn't say a number, but I had predicted last week for my bold predictions. Actually, it was my extra bold prediction that he'd score 30 plus. But I think if he stays healthy, he goes well over 30 plus.
Okay, yeah, and I like that. But I will just kind of stick with the obvious, stick with the Sidney Crosby veteran player, the excellence of Sidney Crosby, and I'll say 41. By the way, I will give him another 40-goal season, one less from last year. but there will be other improvements to be had for Sidney Crosby.
I like it. Another 40-goal season for the captain. And let's move over with that to the power play points here, because that's going to be a big topic of conversation all season long. Crosby led the team in power play points last year. Erik Karlsson had a good bit. He was in the top 3. Evgeni Malkin was in the top 3, as you would expect whenever you watch the Penguins power play. Even if it's bad, you know those 3 players are going to have a hand in it. So I would imagine we're going to each pick from one of those 3 players. Horwat, who do you have leading the team in power play points this year?
I have Sidney Crosby again. It's just hard to come up with anyone else putting up counting stats of predicting this team out right now, especially on the power play, because it was so horrid last year that it just feels like the obvious answer as well. Mm-hmm. I threw down a number of 30 just to kind of throw a number down. I don't expect to be correct on the number part of it, but definitely a step in the right direction, an improvement. I think we're all expecting the power play to be better and everyone to get more points, but I think Crosby will probably lead the way in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we all expect that power play to be better, and I will ask in a second what you've thought about the power play so far. Again, preseason, grain of salt. Erik Karlsson hasn't even been out there, so you have to obviously understand that it's going to look a little bit different once the regular season rolls around and throughout the season. But speaking of Erik Karlsson, that's my pick for this one. You know, I like the pick of Crosby, but everything should, and I'll highlight that again, should run through Erik Karlsson this season, and I'm hoping that he takes a little bit more of a command of that power play unit. You know, with David Quinn running the unit, with him in year 2 with the Penguins, you know, we're expecting those things to help his all-around game. But I think specifically on the power play, they need to instill the confidence in him that, you know, everything runs through you. We've seen the power play look a little bit different, right? The breakout looks like the drop pass is much less of a factor. It looks like they're moving players around. Evgeni Malkin was on the left half wall for a lot of those power plays on Tuesday night against the Red Wings. So I like the movement. I like how they're switching things up. But I do believe that with that, if they're better, it's going to be Erik Karlsson who scores. And that's kind of leads into what I had for my bold prediction of him scoring 70 plus. I think it's going to be because he's going to put in a lot of goals and a lot of points on the power play.
And I like that prediction too. You're right. Everything should be flowing through Erik Karlsson, especially if he is the one that stays on the top unit. And the power plays looked a bit more aggressive in terms of getting things done through those practice reps. They look to be making sure they're not passing the puck into the net, except for the fact they did it once in a preseason game.
Yeah.
Still, it's going to be we're all expecting improvements. We're all expecting step forwards, and it should all flow through Erik Karlsson on that blue line.
Yeah, before we go over to points, I want to ask you your opinion on what you've seen so far during the games. I mean, again, preseason games, but these are the practice reps essentially, and it's showing a little glimpse of what they're trying to do. And it looks like for the first time in multiple years, they're making some substantial changes to the actual scheme when it comes to their power play.
It does. I just feel like I haven't seen enough of it from the guys that will be on it. I mean, we haven't seen the starting 5, if you will, in too many preseason games. So it's tough to give a label and tough to assess. But so far, again, steps in the right direction.
Yeah, more shot-centric and seemingly getting more shots from the center of the ice and moving a couple guys more towards the center of the ice. Again, we're going to have to wait to see a lot more. I know Jesse Marshall of The Athletic has mentioned that he's going to do a video room on it once there's more regular season reps. So I'm looking forward to that, to kind of seeing the X's and O's of these differences and these changes that, you know, you can put it all on David Quinn, but I think a large part of this is Mike Sullivan noticing that something needs to change and also knowing that he's going to need to evolve when it comes to the power play and the Pittsburgh Penguins. Let's go over to points, the big one for this. Probably the biggest prediction we can make. Who is going to lead the Penguins in points this year? I'm going to say it goes to the guy who's led it 13 of the past 19 seasons. The only player on the Penguins that I'm confident can get a point per game. I'm going to go with Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, that's what I went with too. Like I brought up before, it's the trend, and it always has been. Expect that to continue. Probably his entire career, honestly. If it's not Crosby, it's Malkin, and we know it's not going to be Malkin this year. So Sidney Crosby will take it in my eyes. I wrote down 102. I don't know. I just kind of shot a number down, and that would be a record-breaking number for his age. You figure I had 40 goals, 30 power play points. I mean, things are already looking up. I forget, we discussed it a little bit last episode, a couple episodes ago, and I kind of forget if I alluded to anything there. But 102 for Crosby to cap off another tremendous season, and with any luck, helping this team out in many ways, shapes, and forms.
Well, a little later in the show, we're going to go over under, but I'm glad to know I already know your answer on that one. All good though. I mean, 102 would be a heck of a season, would be a lot of fun to watch for Sidney Crosby. Win total. Last year, the Penguins had 38 wins, but 12 overtime losses. So they were in a lot of these games, just couldn't get over the hump. Horwat, how many wins do you predict for the Penguins in 2024-25?
To make the playoffs last year, it took, 39 wins was the lowest to get in the Eastern Conference. That was the New York Islanders who finished third, but they also had 16 overtime losses. I'm going to give the Penguins 44. It's a math 6-win improvement, which they lost far more than 6 games by a single goal where they couldn't score a power play goal in. So, and you needed less than 6 wins to make it to the playoffs for the Penguins. So, if you find a way to improve that power play and you don't lose those games by a single tally and certain things are running the right way, 44 should be an easily attainable number. That stat of however many one goal losses, however many that was, tacked on with the power play being porous, that should do it.
Yeah, I mean, I was right there with you. I didn't go 44. I did 43. So I'm Price is right in here, which feels awful, but that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to stick with 43 wins. I agree with you, though. I mean, you look at all those 1-goal losses, you'd have to imagine at some point that gets figured out, especially with the power play that finished 30th in the National Hockey League, especially with a team that, listen, can they get rid of that stigma that they can't hold a third period lead? Who knows? I mean, we saw them on Monday, even though it was the B team, and they were able to go out there and extend the lead and go out there and not play on their back feet because they had a 1-goal lead and they made it 4-1, then 5-1 with the empty net goal. And they did a similar thing on Sunday. I mean, they had a lead in the third period, 3-2, and they extended upon that lead with the goal from Sidney Crosby on the power play in the third. So if they can carry that into the regular season, I think that'll make me much more confident in this prediction. But I do think that they have an improvement on last season, just simply because if the power play is any better, there's no way they're not going to improve overall, because I don't think the team on paper got worse. Certainly, I think it might have gotten better a little bit. So on paper, I'm going to give them 5 more wins, which is a jump. But I think because of the power play plus the additions, I think they'll have 43 wins on the season. Let's close out this first half of predictions with where you think they'll finish in the Metropolitan Division. Last year, I believe they finished 6th in the Metro, which is not good at all. But Horwat, where do you think they finish this season when it comes to the Metropolitan Division? They finished 5th last year, by the way.
I was going to say, they finished 5. It felt like 6 because it was such a log jam at the end of that division. And the Islanders snuck in, like I said, with 39 wins. I think they can finish 3rd. And I feel like they're going to have to finish 3rd to make the playoffs because the Atlantic is going to be so strong. They might send 5 teams to the playoffs. If the Penguins want a chance at the postseason, I feel like they're going to have to be in the top 3. If I've already predicted they're going to make the playoffs already, they're going to have to be in the top 3. So I'm going to give them 3rd. The Rangers are just too good right now, really. And the way Trouba is treating it as a last dance vibe, they're going to be, it's a last dance for the core player, for the veterans there.
For the core, yeah,
especially.
It makes sense. I just like his last dance is a dance that could, I don't care, go ahead and dance somewhere else. Like for guys like Panarin, guys like Shesterkin, whose contract is up, which is going to kind of push some of these guys out the door potentially if he takes all the money that he can. Yeah, I understand it to that extent that this core, this build, it could be the last dance. But hearing Trouba say that is comical, because to me, he's not part of the core at all up there.
I think he's thinking of it as like him. I could see Kreider maybe being on a block if they have, because they're going to have to pay for Lafreniere and Keandre Miller. I think there's another one too who's up there. But like him who did I just say? Kreider and maybe
Miller.
Trocheck. I know he's newish, but those guys. And then Carolina, I know people aren't high on them, but they're still going to be a good team. So
yeah,
the rest of the Metro is kind of mid. So we'll go from there.
Okay, listen, I know your thoughts on the other team that I have in the top three, but we'll get to there in a second. I want to say third. I want to say that they will finish third. But again, the team I would have knocked out of the top three to put the Penguins in there is Carolina. And I just think about that and say Carolina in the regular season. I can't see them getting bumped out yet. Like, I understand that every team goes up, every team goes down. Carolina has just been so good throughout the last half decade in the regular season. I have a hard time that they're going to bounce down to fourth in the division. So I can't take them out. You mentioned the Rangers. They're due a little bit of regression because they were the President's Trophy winners last year, and you're just not going to be that good back-to-back regular seasons. We saw it with Boston a couple seasons back when they were historically good, and then I believe they finished in third or fourth in their division the following season. And I'm high on New Jersey, man. I know you're not, but I like what they did on that defense. I like what they did in net, and they already have all the snipers up front. They have the big guns up front, so I'm high on the New Jersey Devils. As much as I don't know if I trust Sheldon Keefe, I think that he has the right mix in New Jersey to get them at least a top three spot in the Metro this season. So since I can't knock any of those teams out, I'll give the Penguins fourth. I don't have very much faith in the Islanders. I like what Spencer Carberry did late last season, but I don't have much faith in the Washington Capitals throughout an 82-game season. So I'll say the Penguins finish fourth.
I don't hate that either. I've kind of forgot about the Devils, but also that's the sort of state they should be in, that they've been forgotten about. It's time to step up and take a spot, take a top three spot. And yeah, I think a healthy season from them. I have more faith in Sheldon Keefe than a lot of people, I think. But he'll get them places definitely in the regular season, and then it'll be up to them to decide in the postseason. And they beat the Rangers 2 years ago, so they can do it.
Yeah, plenty more predictions to come. But before we get to the remainder of our predictions, we're going to send it over to our interview with Zachary Smith of Around the 412. Hope you guys enjoy it. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. We're joined by a very special guest to close out this episode. You can hear him on Steelers Afternoon Drive for Pittsburgh Steelers Now. He is one of the hearts as well as the minds of the Rockin' Around the 412 initiative. He is also your favorite Pittsburgh fan's favorite Pittsburgh fan. He's the host of Around the 412. Welcome to the show, Zachary Smith.
What an intro. I'll be honest, based off that short clip that you guys played at the beginning, I didn't know if it could get better than that. And then you started talking about me. If you got anything else to add, I'd love to hear it as well. I'm going to make that my Twitter bio immediately following this. So
I mean, incredibly handsome, smart, phenomenal reader, has
no, see, I don't know if nobody agrees with that handsome one for sure. I could tell based off getting more audio listens than we do views on YouTube. So
we're sure you know puck, ball, and bat. But you know it all.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Appreciate you guys having me. I'm excited to be on here again.
Yeah, we haven't had you on in a bit, but we figured brand new season. Obviously, we're all excited about the new look Pittsburgh Penguins, even though they've been new look for the past, seems like 3 years, shifting everything around in the bottom six, which I'm sure we'll get to. But I wanted to start off with kind of looking back at last year to help preview this year. The Penguins, I mean, they had several warts that led to them missing the playoffs for a second consecutive season. So when you look at this team now, what do you think their biggest weakness is as they head into this season?
I think there's questions. So it's tough because is it a weakness or is it just a question mark for me? That's kind of where I'm at with like, okay, is the goaltending going to bounce back? Started off really strong last year, both when it was Tristan Jarry or Alex Nedeljkovic. Both looked pretty strong early on, but that faded obviously down the stretch. Who's going to be Sid's top left wingers? Drew O'Connor did the first shot. I'm very high on Drew O'Connor. I think this could be a breakout year for him, but that's obviously a question mark. Do they have enough scoring within the bottom six? That was something that kind of transitioned last year where it was like they kind of built a bottom six in my mind that was more about preventing chances as opposed to and just kind of conceding. These guys probably aren't going to score a lot. The offensive output from a guy like maybe Lars Eller was a bit of a surprise in a positive way compared to expectation. But is that going to happen again? He kind of falls into that same category with an aging core, which brings me to the next thing that's a question mark. Are those guys going to, be able to hold up yet again over the course of an 82-game season? So, The weaknesses for me are just about like question marks and not being so sure that they have the depth to make up for those question marks.
So, I mean, that kind of will dovetail into sort of what I wanted to go toward as well is the Penguins always have the tendency to have a player or two that, or even just the team itself that just self-destruct on themselves. Who on the Penguins roster would you look at as the biggest threat to the Penguins themselves? Like, could it be one of the new guys like a Grizzlick, or is it someone that's still not learning from their mistakes like last year in Ryan Graves almost?
Yeah, I think 2/3 of the left side. You just mentioned the two names that I was thinking of. I have major concerns about, besides Marcus Pettersson in terms of how they're going to line up on opening night with those guys. But the goaltending as well. I mean, I brought it up already, but again, like Tristan Jarry is a guy that could look like one of the 5 best goalies in hockey, or look like he's unplayable, depending on what version of you get him that night or what portion of the season you're in. Also, like I never like to hold injuries against the guy, but obviously has not been the healthiest guy over his body of work here. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it. If you're asking me one guy, because I think the goaltending is going to be the bigger wart if it comes to the forefront. I know it'd be tougher with 2 guys of the 3. If it's one of those guys, you can shelter them, you can kind of bury their minutes, you can protect them more. You can't protect a goalie that can't stop a beach ball.
And to even continue, like we now see that Nedeljkovic is going to be out week to week, and maybe giving Blomqvist the looks, to start the season. And maybe that adjusts your answer a bit and changes what you would think. But how long of a leash is Jarry going to be on this year, considering how last season ended, essentially with, Nedeljkovic stealing the job? Even in the useless game 82, it was Nedeljkovic still going out there. Just is Jarry still looked at as the number 1 guy, even with the healthy Nedeljkovic? And how long is that leash, if he has one at all?
You mentioned when you brought me in here that I host a podcast called Steelers Afternoon Drive. So I got to work one Steelers analogy in here. Last year, when the Steelers didn't show the faith in Kenny Pickett to put him back out there, that was kind of the writing on the wall to me, that they didn't view him as the franchise guy, regardless of what they said. If you didn't have the confidence to go forward with Tristan Jarry last year, despite it being absolutely meaningless. Now, in the short term, he can be the guy playing the games. But I'll be honest, I feel like the ship for me has sailed, and it maybe even has internally for him being the guy long term for this team. Now, if he goes out here again and kind of implodes this season, will they give that many games to a young Yoel Blomqvist? I don't necessarily foresee that happening. But he can answer the long-term question for them, even if he might be the short-term solution, just because there isn't that guy behind him.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with the Penguins goaltending right now is that uncertainty of the future. I mean, yeah, you have exciting guys in Blomqvist, and everybody loves Sergei Murashov, but I mean, the kid has played maybe 4 total games if you count Prospects Challenge, now preseason, and now Wilkes-Barre preseason. You just don't know how that's going to project out and how far down the road that's going to project out. And the one thing we've seen from Kyle Dubas is he is trying to make this team as good as humanly possible for this year, while still trying to kind of close that window and build that next generation. But for the short term, I mean, Tristan Jarry, the Kenny Pickett scenario, I mean, it's very similar, but the problem being it was much easier for the Steelers to offload Kenny Pickett than it will be for the Penguins to offload a guy in Tristan Jarry. So can you find a partner like that? And the question that I have now off of that is immediately thinking, if Jarry comes out and starts October, November, December, like he has throughout his career before the self-destruct typically happens, is that the point you look in trading him before, it happens again and you potentially know the league is going to see him decline and that opportunity to trade him goes away?
Yeah, I think, that just kind of we're going to get some answers about Kyle Dubas and the organization. Then at that point, how calculated is he going to be in executing this plan? That was a good point that you brought up there about just like kind of the way that we've seen him accumulate assets despite not necessarily selling, right? Like they haven't moved like the big pieces other than Jake Gensel last year at the deadline. Like they haven't been offloading their pieces. They're still trying to win hockey games, but at the same time, not mortgaging the future, kind of being on the other side of that now, acquiring a guy like Kevin Hayes to basically buy a draft pick and stuff like that. And, you bring the goaltending goaltender Tristan Jarry into the conversation. If he does start out well, but the Penguins aren't in the mix, I could maybe see that. But as long as they're competitive, and I think that they're going to be competitive at the very least, we can talk in a little bit about if I view them as a playoff team. I kind of, that's a hard sell for me, thinking that they would move on from him if he is playing well and the team is playing well.
Now, this is year 2 of Kyle Dubas, and we talked briefly about, okay, he rebuilt the bottom 6. He's trying to figure out the goaltending situation, but I know the bottom 6 is a question mark going into this year, and it's been a question mark for the Penguins since they blew everything up after the 2022 playoffs when they lost to the Rangers. But do you think Dubas did a good job of addressing that area this summer, kind of shifting focus from, as you mentioned, being a more defense-heavy bottom 6 last year to trying to find a little bit more scoring and a little bit more youth as well, which seems to be one of his focuses?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that there's a plethora of bottom 6 guys, right? Like, that's why I was so interested in this training camp and this preseason, because you got like a dozen guys basically fighting for 6 spots that you could make an NHL case for. My favorite addition of the offseason, now hurt, Blake Lizotte, I thought was an awesome addition for what this team needed. And we'll see how much time he's going to miss. But he was probably my favorite addition that they made the offseason. I hate comparing players, right? But like, just the juice that he brings, the style of play. Penguin fans would love to hear me say he's a 1-to-1 to Brandon Tanev. I don't think it's a 1-to-1 comparison, but the style of hockey that he plays, I think it kind of brings a similar element there. Again, I mentioned like Kevin Hayes, you get a draft pick along with him. I think there's something there. I really love the idea of him playing with like a Valtteri Puustinen. I think those two would be an awesome combination together. It's the way that they kind of feed off of each other. Jesse Puljujarvi had a nice, preseason debut, obviously scored the hat trick. We'll see if he can maybe be a part of the equation. We'll see. It's just, there's so many guys, right? Like, unless they're trading, and I don't know at this juncture that's going to happen, like a Lars Eller, who I thought could have been on the move, at the deadline last year, Noel Acciari, who has 2 years left on his deal. I don't know. It's just going to be, it's the most intriguing part of all of this to me, is to see what 6 guys are in those spots on opening night, because there's so much competition for just 6 spots.
And you mentioned Blake Lizotte there and how, there's already an injury occurring. And we mentioned Nedeljkovic, who already has his injury. And Erik Karlsson is yet to take the ice with the team. Are you concerned at all about these injuries? And given the trend of the league right now, how are you viewing the rest of the preseason for the Penguins? Is it bubble wrap time for every star? And just when it comes to your concern level, is it high, or are we kind of coasting into the season just with, because Erik Karlsson did just tell a golf podcast he's going to be playing, but
yeah, what was up with that? Why they getting the scoop? A golf podcast.
I tried listening to it.
Why didn't that conversation happen on Tip of the Ice-Burgh? That's what I want.
Tip of the Ice-Burgh, around the 412, any of them. But it's the concern level, I guess, is kind of what we're all worried about here.
Yeah, do the Penguins have the same strength and conditioning staff as the Steelers? Is that what's going on here all of a sudden? No, but in all seriousness, it's a very thin line. It's tough because I see both sides of the coin, right? I think if you really protect all your guys and they don't play at all, then you worry about rust early in the season. At the same time, if one suffers a major injury, there's going to be a ton of backlash about them playing in the preseason. So threading that needle is very tough. I think ultimately they've done a pretty decent job. Now, I don't know, as long as Erik Karlsson's ready to go on opening night, I'm not going to question anything. If we get to that point, or even a couple days before, and we still haven't seen him do much, I'm going to really start to question if they were hiding something more there. But, in terms of the workload that I've seen so far throughout training camp and the preseason, I don't necessarily think that there's anything that they're doing wrong. Now, if you talk about big picture league wide, some of the stuff that I've seen, the one thing that I will say more than just the playing time of these guys on the ice, man, these guys that are getting into fights and these hits that are suspendable and stuff like that taking place in the preseason. There's no place for those type of plays at any time, but especially in the preseason. What are we doing?
Yeah, that's the trend around the league this year that I feel like has amped up more than it has in years past. Obviously Arbor Jackeye is the kind of focal point of all of this in good and bad ways. So it's really something where, you saw the lineup that the Penguins put out for the next preseason game. It is a lot of guys that are not going to be on the NHL roster next week. Now you do have guys like Jesse Puljujarvi, who's fighting for a spot. Rutger McGroarty continues to get every opportunity possible to prove that he can earn that spot, as well as guys like Harrison Brunick. So, you're putting out, guys that are fighting for an opportunity and kind of sheltering the guys like Crosby, the guys like Malkin, the guys like Letang, who, listen, they played in Sudbury, and outside of that, they've only played home games. And there's a reason for that, because they can control that environment a little bit more. So I think, we're seeing similar things happen across sports. Like the NFL went down from 4 to 3 preseason games. I think you'll start to see that in the NHL too.
It's going to be 0 relatively soon, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, it stinks for certain aspects. I mean, people that can't afford to go to regular season games on a regular basis, it's a little bit opens the door for them to go in the preseason, which is,
I think it's harder to judge the guys on your roster, like the bottom, the bottom of the roster guys that you're hoping to be from. Like, when I talked to somebody in the organization about it, they were like, you got a pretty good idea about 45 or 46 of your guys, but there's like 7-ish spots that are kind of available for those guys fighting for those spots. That'd be tough going to 0 preseason games, but I think it happens relatively soon. But you mentioned the name in there, Harrison Brunick, by the way.
Yeah,
that's my takeaway. That's my main takeaway so far from this preseason. He's awesome.
Yeah, I hope he gets back-to-back opportunities the next 2 days. I understand that would be 3 games in 4 days, but maybe he gets that 9-game sample size, which you're going to see 3 games in 4 days at the NHL level. Test the kid out early. I'd like to see him. Obviously, he's playing tomorrow or expected to be on the roster tomorrow. I'd like to see him play with the big boys on Friday in the preseason finale too, and really test it out to say, hey, can you stand up whenever this is happening night in and night out with travel? So he's been very interesting, and he's a right shot defenseman. You mentioned earlier that you're a little worried about the 2 left shot defensemen that are behind Marcus Pettersson. The Pens are banking on a couple bounce back performances across the board. I mean, you can include Ricard Raquel. You can include, I'm trying to think of who else, maybe Nola Chari in the offensive zone, hoping that he can kind of get that going again where it was.
And I'll be honest too. I like, from a numbers standpoint, Brian Rust had an okay year last year. Still like 27 goals or something like that. Didn't feel that way though. Like, I think that the puck luck certainly favored him probably more than it should have. I feel like he didn't necessarily have a Brian Rust type year either. With him and Raquel, you kind of have to worry, like, are they kind of on the downward trajectory now of their careers? Certainly, but he's somebody that I think could have a better season in 24 than he did in 23 as well.
That all leads me though to the defense, which is important here for the Penguins. I mean, do you have more faith in Ryan Graves or Matt Grzelcyk to bounce back this season? That's a loaded question, but I mean, 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other potentially. But do you have more faith in one of these guys?
Like one or the other, if I had to pick one?
I mean, if you have faith in both of them, by all means, lift our spirits.
Well, no, I'm saying it's more of, do I have to pick one that I have to have faith in? I mean, this is like David Quinn's project, right? Is getting one of these guys back on track. Like, I mean, I think that, here's what I'll say is, I think that Grzelcyk can move the puck. I think he can definitely bring an element that they maybe don't have in that respect. On that, well, I don't know what pairing he's going to play on. Maybe you guys have a definitive idea of how you feel like the pairings are going to go. But regardless, I feel okay about him at least bringing something to the table about his ability to transition the puck up the ice. Now, in terms of his in zone defense, I think there leaves a lot to be desired and can certainly get himself into trouble. That element is going to allow him to at least at times be able to get himself out of trouble. In Ryan Graves' case, I don't know that there's like a redeeming quality that I'm looking at right now based off last year that I can say this is how you make this guy at least a serviceable player. I am very curious as to what the path forward is for him this year, because I'll tell you what, I'm getting sick of people just saying it was a Paul Martin situation, just year one in a different system and he needs to adjust. That's not every player that has a bad year ever in their first year with the new organization. Ryan Graves was just awful. I don't necessarily have a ton of hope that it changes in year 2, but I'm curious to see how they try to maneuver around that.
And the issue with that sort of mindset too is, it was just a bad year for Ryan Graves. It was his first year in the organization. Okay, well then is that same thing going to happen with Matt Grzelcyk? Are we stepping into that sort of, like, because then it's double-edged sword all of a sudden, and it's, well, if you're looking for the bounce back from Ryan Graves, he's going to do great. Guess who's not then? The other new guy they just brought in. If anything, at least Grzelcyk's here for a year. You have that to sort of lean on, but that doesn't make you feel good. That doesn't make you feel.
I love when we sign guys and the immediate thought is, at least it's only 1 year. Like, okay,
exactly.
That tells you what type of signing we're talking about.
And it's not ideal. And it helps that there is a ton of, young depth that might be able to step up, but at the same time, you're dealing with a bunch of names here that are making over $1 million, that are making NHL wages, that what are you going to do with if, everything goes wrong? And that's kind of where the issue is.
I guess if we don't have faith in those two guys, you have faith in like a Ryan Shea, who we saw last year, obviously at times, a John Ludwig playing on that side who can play both sides. I don't know. Aho maybe playing on the offside. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is if one or both of those guys fail you.
Hope Owen Pickering progresses like in light speed.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. Do you think he gets time in the NHL this year? Like non-injured. Let's assume health. Sure. Yeah. Let's assume health and say those 6 guys stay healthy, but obviously perform the way that we're kind of expecting.
Yeah, I find it hard to believe that they're going to take one of Grzelcyk or Graves out of the lineup, even if they're struggling. Yeah, even if they're struggling. I mean, there's a chance, but they are pounding the table to try to get these guys to work out, especially Graves, because that was. I mean, you can say what you want about Jarry, but that was Dubas' first stamp on this organization, and he is not willing to let that go into the good night quite yet.
I think there's going to be a ton of resources and pride put into the idea of fixing him.
Yeah,
because of how bad year 1 was, what they've invested in him. I mean, if they come back and make him a serviceable player, they're going to be able to throw it back into the faces of everybody.
And that's what you're hoping for. That's the kind of outcome that
I'd love to eat crow.
Yeah, that's the one thing we would all like to eat crow in this situation. And the one thing that'll make us all do that is, and this will be the question that I have for you here, is do you feel like this team is a playoff team the way it's constructed right now going into the season?
I view them the same way I have the last couple. I think that they are a fringe playoff team that's either going to be just inside or just outside. I think they're going to be in the wild card mix. It's hard to assume health, right? I mean, knock on wood. I got a wood desk here, so I'm literally knocking on wood. Sidney Crosby goes down for any period of time. No. Sidney Crosby has the same type of year that he did last year. You get a full season of Michael Bunting with what he brought to the table last year, that pairing with Gino. Those a little bit of a bounce back from Rickard Rakell. We talked about the defense, like Tristan Jarry stays healthy and performs like the first half. Tristan Jarry, yeah, this could be a playoff team. I foresee a path there. I also see a path where this goes terribly wrong, and it all kind of evens out to me. So I think that they're going to be right in the mix. I'll say they get in by a point.
Well, Zach, thank you so much for your time today. Again, you can find him at Steelers Afternoon Drive every afternoon on Pittsburgh Steelers Now or on Around the 412. Zach, appreciate you coming on and looking forward to the season.
Appreciate you guys as always. Thanks.
A thank you goes out again to Zachary Smith of Around the 412. You can follow him on Twitter at Zachary Smith PGH, and you can find him anywhere you get your podcast from at Around the 412, as well as Steelers Afternoon Drive. We got to push that as well. He does great work over there with Steelers or Pittsburgh Steelers Now. So appreciate him joining the show. And we also have another interview coming up next Tuesday to help preview the season that we think you guys will enjoy too. So if you liked Zach Smith, which I believe everybody would have, I mean, how can you not? I think you'll also like what we have cooking for you guys next Tuesday. But we also have more season predictions to go before we close things out today. Horwat, let's ramp it back up here with the only prediction that is exclusive to the tip of the iceberg, which is the Iron Penguin Award. We had so many winners last season. You think Sidney Crosby, you think Evgeni Malkin, you think Kris Letang, you think Erik Karlsson. I mean, a long laundry list of Iron Penguin Award winners. Let me try to bring up the actual list here to make sure I don't miss anybody, because, I mean, there was just a lot. Malkin, Letang, Crosby, Karlsson, Eller played in all 82 last year, and Marcus Pettersson became a 2-time winner last season. So who do you see being the Iron Penguin Award winners this year?
I'm not going to pick more than one, just because it is always tough to pick multiple people that are going to play all 82 games. But I want to throw out a name that is new to the organization again. He played 81 last year between two teams, and that is Michael Bunting. Kind of a horse. If he's able to stay healthy, I think he's got that ability. He's played 82 before in his last year at Toronto, played 79 the year before that. And like I said, 81 last year between Carolina and Pittsburgh. You know, he's not a guy that strikes you as injured all the time. And there might be more than one name. I just wanted to throw a new one into the mix.
Yeah, I actually have two new names in the mix as well. I'm not going with any of the big guns because I'm not putting that out there that they're going to have a full 82, especially for a third consecutive season for Crosby and Malkin. You hope so, but I'm not putting the prediction out there. What I am going to say is Iron Penguin Award. It's hard to go against Pettersson, but I'm not sure where his future lies. If he gets traded, that's it. That's the end of it. So I'm not sure where his future lies. So I'm going to go with two players that I think are going to be on the team the whole season. I think that'll be in the lineup the whole season. And I think should be able to maintain health throughout the season. One of them played on 3 different teams last year, and that's Anthony Beauvillier. And I know some people don't want to hear that. Some people are like, oh man, I hope Anthony Beauvillier becomes a healthy scratch at some point, which if he does, that means there's other players performing. But I think that Anthony Beauvillier is a name you're going to see night in and night out for the Pittsburgh Penguins this year. So I'm going to stick with him as one of my Iron Penguins. And the other one, let's go the big boy, Kevin Hayes. I think Kevin Hayes is a guy that has proven to be pretty durable throughout his career. He's somebody that the Penguins can use in multiple different areas of the lineup, center, wing, penalty kill. He's an important facet of this team this year. I don't think this is a player that is going to get traded simply because of what's left on that contract. I think the Penguins would need to be able to get something back. And you just saw St. Louis literally gave up things and took nothing back in order to get rid of Kevin Hayes there. So I'm going to go with Kevin Hayes, and Anthony Beauvillier is my Iron Penguins.
I don't hate that either. I think the Anthony Beauvillier one is interesting because
that one's risky.
It is, because he was a player that the second he was signed here, a lot of fans were hoping he wasn't going to play at all. So there's that for you. But otherwise, I don't hate it. I just don't know their trend of injuries, and I think that's sort of something you have to keep in mind when doing something like this. But I like those picks too, for sure.
Yeah, and it's funny because, you mentioned Anthony Beauvillier. He was another one of those. We talked about it with Smitty. He was another one of those, well, at least it's only a year players. So, I mean, it's only a year, but maybe you get that full 82. You get every single ounce out of that year with Anthony Beauvillier. And who knows, if he plays 82 and he performs, maybe you bring him back for another year. Who knows? But, I think this is always a fun one for us to follow along with when the season starts, because you picked one name, I picked 2. At the start of the year, there's only 18 players that could be up for that, and that's the 18 skaters that go out there on October 9th against the New York Rangers. Crosby over under 94 points, which was his point total last year. Horwat said earlier in the show he's going over, and he's going 102. And you know what? I'll do you one better. I'll say he goes over the 94 points, and he goes up to 108 this season. I'm predicting a year of all years for Sidney Crosby. That's what I want to see. I have a lot of confidence in him this season. I think a better power play is going to help. And I also think with no Jake Gensel, even though the onus should not be on him because he scored 94, including 40 plus goals last year, I think he'll take that onus on himself to step up and do it himself a little bit more often. So I have Sidney Crosby over 94 points by a large margin. I have him at 108, which again, a little bit of risky for an early season prediction for a 37-year-old center, but I do believe that he's going to go out there and have himself a banger of a year.
So I'm just going to immediately start poking holes into what you're saying here, because
that's fine.
You also had Brian Rust leading the team in goals, but staying under 40.
I said 30 plus, well 30 over 30
plus.
I'm not gonna say Brian Rust is gonna score 40 plus because he's never scored 30 plus. So I'm not gonna say it. If he does it, that'd be great. I just expect well over 30 plus. I think Crosby is going to be facilitator of facilitators this year.
No kidding. Because let's say Crosby gets 35. You're looking at, 73?
Yeah.
73 assists, which would be a 21 assist increase from last year.
Hey, listen,
I do like
anyone to put faith in to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's 87.
Absolutely. He'd lead the team in assists by a wide margin, but I like it. I do like it. Like I said, it's over 100 points. It is ghastly over, and I just like the confidence. I like the thought of he knows the position he's in at this point. He knows what this team is doing at this point. He's going to have to put it all on his back, and he's going to be facilitating everything he possibly can. I think part of what makes me give him another 40-goal season is that same thing, except he's going to be shooting a bit more than passing it. My split is 41-61. So it's, hell, I have him picking up a ton of extra assists, but that's where that power play comes into play. So it'll be fascinating to see what he can do. We got some extremely high expectations.
Yeah.
But I think the over 94 was obvious from the start if the power play was going to be clicking at a better pace, and it being, and him being so close to 100 already, it just seems passable.
Let's go over to breakout player. And these are the three that I'm really excited to get your opinion on, because I feel like maybe not breakout player, but most improved and best newcomer. I feel like I have somebody that you're not even thinking of. So let's start with breakout player. Who do you got, Horwat?
I think we're going to see it early. It's going to be Joel Blomqvist stepping into in a brief role, but he's going to push the envelope a bit. I could see it being interesting. We don't know how long Nedeljkovic is going to be out, but even if Blomqvist plays 3 or 4 games, maybe 2 or 3, if he goes 2-0, 3-0, and impresses, and then goes back to the minors and impresses a little more and forces his hand to get a call up somewhere along the way, then he's got more traction. I think it's going to be an underrated breakout season from the rookie goalie, and could be fun. And it's a bit of a stretch to say Joel Blomqvist, who's third in line, is going to be the breakout, but he's going to have an early opportunity, and he's got to take quick advantage of it.
Yeah, can he have that Philip Gustafson year from a couple years ago where he comes up even though there's an established goaltender in Marc-Andre Fleury, and he just says, you can't not start him a lion's share of these games. I mean, it would be a bookend, right? He's going to start the year at the NHL level, or at least we expect him to start the year at the NHL level now due to Alex Nedeljkovic's injury. And then, if this holds true and he is the breakout player, that means by the end of the season, he's up and he's not just a number 2, but probably a 1B. To whether that's Nedeljkovic or Jarry, again, where I'm not going to make you, crystal ball that entire situation, but I'd be interested, and I would obviously love to see a rookie goaltender come up and be that good for the Penguins, because that just opens up possibilities for Kyle Dubas to help build this team into the future, as well as really shape it next season. But again, don't want to get the cart in front of the horse for that one. My breakout player this year, I think, is more aligned with what most people are expecting from this position, Rutger McGroarty. I mean, I am bullish on this kid. He has not lit the world on fire throughout the preseason, but I still hold true to what I said last week during bold predictions. I mean, he is going to start the season at the AHL level. He's going to be up before November 1st, and he's still going to score 20-plus goals. And if that's the case, he is your breakout player. There is no way anybody else is going to be able to break out more than that from a college player last year to a 20-plus goal scorer this year. Again, lofty expectations, but I just feel like even if he doesn't get to that, he's going to establish himself as that everyday NHLer. And I think by the end of the year, he's going to establish himself as an everyday top 6 player. And how can you not go from, those two polar opposites from where he was last year to this year, if that happens, and not say he's the breakout player? It's a similar path to what Drew O'Connor took, where he was the third line player at the start of last season, and he was bona fide number 1 left wing on the Penguins by game 82.
Yeah, and that will go along the lines of what I said last episode as well, which was he'll start in the AHL, fine, but then he'll eventually get that quick call up. And I said play most of the season with Sidney Crosby and maybe even fight for the Calder Trophy, which is why also I penned him in as the best newcomer. Got to remember, he wasn't here last season. He wasn't even in the organization. He was a Winnipeg Jet. So that's kind of why I wanted to separate the breakout player, because you're right. I thought him as the breakout player at first as well, but then remembered he's technically also a newcomer. So going to cheat a bit and have a different answer here.
Yeah.
So for all those reasons you said, for all the things that I said last episode about him, and because he was a Jet last year and the Penguins traded off Braden Yeager for him, giving him the best newcomer this year.
Alrighty, I like that. For best newcomer, listen, we talked about it with Smitty. Cautiously optimistic about how this player is going to perform. But at the same time, if the Penguins took a chance on him to put him in that position, again, only a 1-year deal, so not the biggest chance, but they took a chance on him. So will I. Best newcomer for the Penguins this year, Matt Grzelcyk. Again, I've liked what I've seen. It hasn't been perfect in preseason, but I like the chemistry between him and Kris Letang early on. I think there's obviously steps to be made and strides to be taken for these guys. But to this point, I'm cautiously optimistic about Matt Grzelcyk, more so than I was. I don't want to say more so, because I was very excited about Ryan Graves last year and then it smacked me in the face on opening night. But I'm cautiously optimistic about Grzelcyk. I think that he fits a little bit better with Kris Letang than Graves did. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm going to say he's the best newcomer.
Ryan Graves humbled you a bit in
Yeah.
in picking
Otherwise, I
defensemen.
would have been a little bit more confident about this because I'm just like, defenseman. I was so off last year. Maybe I'm not as off this year, but hopefully Matt Grzelcyk works out, because if he doesn't, the Penguins are in, as we talked about with Smitty, they are in deep crap.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and I mean, the options for newcomer, there's a ton of them. Blake Lizotte, Kevin Hayes, Cody Glass, Rutger McGroarty, Matt Grzelcyk, Sebastian Aho if you really wanted to, and any other, Anthony Beauvillier, depth defenseman. There's enough names to go around.
You could throw in there guys like Ponomarev and Koivunen and Blomqvist, because who knows, potentially at some point this season, if they get an opportunity and they run with it, they could be there. I think that's where they're at in their current development path. So, these are players that are all knocking on the door. If they step in and they get comfortable, it's going to be hard to kick them out.
Yeah, it will be.
Let's finish this episode off and all of these predictions off. Again, part of prediction weeks here at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. We had our bold predictions last week. Go back and listen to that if you're interested. We have our season predictions this week. And then on Tuesday, we'll have our league predictions, which are always a little bit of fun. But let's close out the Penguins season predictions with the most improved player. Horwat, who you got?
I had a couple of names written down, but I want to go with the strangest one because his position in the lineup is awkward at the moment. Noel Acciari. Now, he had a fine season last year defensively, but then injuries piled up. The offense obviously wasn't there, and it wasn't going to be there. Kyle Dubas stood so hard on, he's not here to score goals, guys. And that may continue into this season. Like I said, his position in the lineup isn't necessarily guaranteed. He's not even in this lineup that I'm looking at from Daily Faceoff. But, I mean, come on. We all kind of expect him to be in there, right? Just because of the way Kyle Dubas looks at him, because of the style of game that he plays very well with what Mike Sullivan likes from his depth guys. I could see Noel Acciari adding another level of intensity to his defensive game. He was a key to that penalty kill for a while. Let's not forget that too. If that can continue into this season, and maybe he bangs home a few more goals, adds a few extra points, especially if he's playing with Lars Eller, that's extremely possible. That'll be just a step in the right direction. Big braining, most improved would be Sidney Crosby, considering we had him gaining 20 points basically.
Yeah. I like the Noel Acciari pick, though. I think that's an underrated one where, I mean, look, he scored 2 goals on Monday. I mean, right? That's almost as many goals as he scored all of last season. But, moving him over to the wing, everybody, I think, was in agreement that that's probably what's best for him. And the Penguins now agree because they've put him on the wing through most of the preseason. And you would imagine that's where he's going to stay once the regular season begins, especially with the amount of options that they have to take faceoffs at center ice. Even with Blake Lizotte down, you would imagine that Acciari stays over on the wing and they run, whether it's Eller, Hayes, whoever, as that fourth line center. But for most improved, I'm going with my guy. I'm going with a guy whose spot in the lineup is not guaranteed at this moment in time because he has not had the above and beyond preseason that some of the other players that are in competition for this spot have been. But I'm going with Valtteri Puustinen. Last year, 5 goals, 20 points in 52 games. There were certain stretches where you looked at him and said, there's no way he's not an NHL player going forward. Maybe he shouldn't go back to the AHL ever again. Well, you look at what's been added over the offseason, and there's a lot of question marks as to where he fits into this lineup and where he fits onto this roster and whether or not he might have to start the season at the AHL, whether or not he might get claimed off of waivers if he gets placed on him. So I think there's a lot of question marks. But I think the Penguins, if they're able to hold on to him, I think he finds that goal-scoring touch this season. I mean, whenever they went out there and got Kevin Hayes, I said that is a great thing for Valtteri Puustinen, not to really downplay the effect that Lars Eller had on this team last year, because I thought he was one of the best third-line centers they've had in a long time. He just isn't the type of player that's going to set you up with a lot of great goal-scoring looks. Kevin Hayes, more inclined to do things like that. So I think if you can get Puustinen up and on that third line spot, I think that you're going to see him score a lot more than he did last season. I mean, 5 goals in 52 games is far below a guy of his skill set. But again, that was his first foray into everyday NHL playing. This year, with that experience behind him, once he gets that opportunity, I think he's going to take it and run with it. And I expect big things from Valtteri Puustinen this season.
Yeah, same. He was another name that I had on my short list of most improved because there are some high expectations for him. There were some high expectations last season. He just wasn't quite meeting them. If he's able to get on the right path and shoot the puck a lot more, which is basically what Mike Sullivan wants from him, it shouldn't be any issue that he finds great improvement, finds the back of the net a little more. And we already know he can, set guys up. 15 assists, a ton of them came all at once, I think.
Yeah.
It was a good stretch for him. If he's able to maintain that sort of pace and even add to it, there's no reason why he shouldn't be on this team. It'll be tough for him to still make the team because there's so many options, but you like what you saw from him last year, and you hope that sort of momentum is carried into if he makes the team or wherever he goes. I would think he gets claimed, by the way. I don't know why. But
because he's a good young player.
And a ton of teams need depth help. A ton of teams need depth help. There's a lot of great teams in this league.
Yeah.
I mean, the Oilers are really good, but
that's exactly where I was going. You're telling me the Oilers wouldn't want Pustin on their third line? Come on now.
Exactly. Like, the Oilers are so good and might win the President's Trophy, but on the backs of two top forward lines, Evan Bouchard, and outscoring their problems.
Yeah.
I mean, not that Valtteri Pustin provides a level of defense, but they need something in their depth that they just don't have, and yet they still might win the President's Trophy / the Stanley Cup.
Listen, his analytic numbers are they're pretty. They look good. I mean, that's not one-to-one defense, and a lot of that is playing with the majority of his minutes alongside, Lars Eller, which helps a lot, and Riley Smith, I believe, also for a large portion of time, who, for all his woes last year, pretty defensively responsible. So I would say that helps. But hey, listen, numbers don't lie, and those are the numbers on Valtteri Pustin. But that is a wrap for our Pittsburgh Penguins 2024-25 season predictions. Like I mentioned, league predictions are coming at you with Norris Trophy, Hart Trophy, Vezina, all that fun stuff. Stanley Cup picks coming up next week, as well as we get set for the puck drop on the 2024-25 NHL season. Even though there are some games this week overseas, but North American NHL hockey starts next week, and we are very excited for that. But that's going to do it for this longer episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Thank you to everybody that stuck through and listened to the entire thing. Make sure you find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Like, share, and subscribe if you can. And if you don't want to do it on YouTube, you could do it anywhere you get your podcast from. Again, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you write a nice review. 5 stars would be very much appreciated. But that is going to do it for this episode. Next time we come to you guys, it's game week. It's regular season game week. And we're very excited to get through this season with you. That's it for this one. We'll see you next time.